Hello guys and welcome back. Today we're going to be previewing the entire 2023-24 fantasy hockey season, breaking down the best players, the best sleepers at each position, players to avoid, busts in the draft, and helpful tips that will help you win your league in 2024. But make sure you watch till the end for all the helpful tips and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Y'all won't want to miss a thing. Also, a special announcement for the members on this channel. We're going to be doing the second annual Grav Member League on ESPN. The draft is on September 16th at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you aren't a member, become one today. The community post exclusive to you guys has the link for it. If you want to join, go right there right now. Now again, in today's video, we're going to go through the top 10 best fantasy players in the NHL for 2024. We're also going to go for the top 10 sleepers for the forwards, defense, goaltending, go on to the potential players to avoid in this draft, as well as tips to help you in your game in 2024. Now let's first start out with the top 10 fantasy players. If you're picking in the top tier, these are the guys you want to target. First things first, let's go on to number 10 and the 10th best fantasy player for 2024. I'm going to have the second best defenseman on the list in Rasmus Dahlin, who has really jump-started his career in a big way with Buffalo. You see, over the past couple of years, he's put up some great numbers fantasy-wise. 186 in 2021, 296 in 2022. Now, for reference, CBS kind of has it in a weird way where they list 2022 as the 22-23 season. We're heading into 23-24 here, and I think Dahlin is going to be in a great position. As Buffalo gets better and better, Dahlin has risen to the occasion, and you could see maybe even bigger boost in those defensive totals as well. But the offense was elite. I still see that continuing and being one of the best defensemen, especially fantasy-wise, next year. Now let's move on to number 9. Next up, I'm going to go with the Dallas Stars superstar in Jason Robertson, who is in a really unique position fantasy-wise. I could see him kind of dropping off slightly in points. But you can see he got 332 fantasy points according to CBS last year. Just absolutely dominant. It was my first round pick last year, and it paid off in droves. He's been elite, though, and I think we'll still carry over a lot of the elite play, especially that goal scoring. We'll see if maybe those defensive metrics can improve too, maybe getting a little more physical. We'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't personally bet on it. That's why I have him a little bit lower at number 9. Now let's go on to number 8 here, and next up I have Elias Pettersson of the Vancouver Canucks. This one's really interesting because you saw the totals he was able to put up last year. He got 279 fantasy points, 102 points on the season, and to me with Pettersson, I think we'll see a big rise in those counting physical and defensive stats. That's where I think the biggest improvement will be. You also could see even another jump in points, honestly. I could see him getting even more than he did last year, and to me, that's dangerous to see. Absolutely one of the best centers available, and his improving play year after year shows a lot of confidence. Having him in the top 8, I think, is deserved, though. Now moving on to number 7, and a player that's dropped a little bit for me, and that is David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins, mostly because of the situation he is in with Patrice Bergeron retiring. That leaves that first line center hole a little bit wide open. Zacha will likely fill it, but to me, that is a big loss for Pastrnak, a player that was so instrumental to his success. I think we'll still see him play amazing though next year. I mean, he got 366 fantasy points, but maybe more along the 280-300 range for him. He's still in the prime of his career though, and still an excellent bet to reach 100 plus points and 50 plus goals. Now on to number 6, and going on to, in my opinion, the best fantasy defenseman for next year, and it has to be Cale Makar. You see what he's been able to do over the last couple of years, and it's been dominant. 265 points in 2022 after only playing 60 games. Missing 22 games and still getting those point totals are amazing, but it's the offense and with the improved defensive play too. He's shown some massive strides over the past couple of years, and that's been great to see, really propelling him to the top defenseman in the league, but he's going to guarantee you points. Colorado still, even without Landeskog, they're still going to put up some great numbers offensively, but Carr will be behind that. Next up, let's go on to number 5, and starting at the top 5 here, I got Auston Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs. This one's interesting because even though last year we saw a dip in his offensive totals, you saw the defensive play still put up a lot of hits, a lot of blocks, and that was great to see, and that will help his fantasy overall. I think next year we'll see his offense rebound in a big way, though, hopefully getting back to that 100-point mark, and for fantasy owners, I mean, that's exactly what you want to see with that defense improving. Next up, going on to number 4 and going on to one of the best dual threat players in the league right now, and especially for fantasy, is going to be amazing. That is Matthew Tkachuk of the Florida Panthers. With the physical traits he has and the defensive game he has on top of the superstar offense he brings, he is going to be an 100-point guy. It's just a question of how much he will be. But the physical traits and the counting stats are really going to be huge for him for fantasy owners. He has been so consistent in that category through a back-to-back 340-plus seasons fantasy-wise. That is incredible to see. Next up, going on to number 3, we're going to go to another Colorado Avalanche player in Nathan MacKinnon. Really, the big question here is health. If you are a little bit more risky, though, and see MacKinnon having a full season, then absolutely go for him at that 3rd overall spot. He can bring you amazing even strength offense, consistent scoring, and that goal scoring has also taken a big step. 42 goals in 71 games last year, which is huge for the fantasy points. With MacKinnon, though, if he's healthy, he's going to guarantee you basically top 3 points. And that's the big question. If you're risky, take him. If you're feeling a little bit more safe, though, Tkachuk would likely be your pick. Now on to number 2 and number 1, we got Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, respectively. I mean, it's hard not to go for these 2 players back-to-back. They both have proved to be the most elite offensive players in the league, which really for fantasy is the thing that matters the most. With Draisaitl, especially how much he's been able to improve in his point totals, that's really risen him to basically a guaranteed number 2 spot every year. And of course, Connor McDavid is Connor McDavid. But now we're going to go through the sleepers for the forwards, defense, and goaltending positions. Guys later in the draft that you could target and get a lot out of. First things first, at number 10 for the forwards, I got Pavel Zacha of the Boston Bruins. To me, this is a really interesting bet. We talked about Pastrnak stock being a little bit lower because of Bergeron going, but Zacha's stock is raising quite a bit. And it's pretty interesting too. For the NHL, they rated him at a really weird spot, 98th among forwards, which I think is criminally low, especially considering that he was 75th in CBS fantasy scoring among forwards last year. That's going to get even better next season as it gets bigger opportunity with better players. Now going on to number 9 and the 9th biggest sleeper forward-wise, I got Troy Terry of the Anaheim Ducks, a player that had a little bit of a down year last season, but still got 152 points in 2022-23, and I think for the Ducks, as they slightly improve, maybe he has Killorn in his line or something, as they slightly improve offensively, though, Troy Terry's going to be back in a big way, likely still around that 30-40 goal range, which will be incredible to see, but especially considering the NHL ranked him 121st among forwards, he was 99th in CBS fantasy scoring last year on a down year. A lot of value to be had in a Troy Terry pick. Next up, though, let's move on to the 8th biggest sleeper among forwards. And next up, I'm going to go with an interesting one here in Max Domi of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, in terms of his rank, he was ranked 164th by the NHL among forwards for fantasy this year, which is another player criminally low. He was 97th in CBS fantasy scoring last year, and I don't really see that changing much. I mean, he'll be likely on that second line with Tavares and Nylander, and maybe he could even get a little bit of spiciness on that first line if he's given some more opportunity, which I don't think is impossible, especially considering how much the Leafs like to switch around their lines. I think he's going to continue that great season he had last year offensively and be a major contributor for this Leafs team. If you get him in the later rounds, you're laughing. Next up, going on to number 7 and my 7th forward sleeper. This is one that isn't really exciting or flashy whatsoever, but will get you valued throughout the year. And that is Jordan Eberle of the Seattle Kraken, who put up 166 fantasy points last year in 2022. And you see the consistency in his scoring, 63 points last year in 82 games. And he'll likely still be on that first line alongside Matty Beniers and Jared McCann, which will lead to a lot of points naturally. But he was ranked in a weird spot too. In terms of his stock, he was ranked in 154th by the NHL in fantasy scoring, and he was 84th in CBS fantasy scoring last year. I still see him being around that range and being a major contributor for Seattle. Next up at number 6, though, we're going to go to another underrated scorer here for the New York Islanders in Brock Nelson, who will put up some major numbers for you, and it's interesting how underrated he's been. He got 217 points as a forward last year, fantasy-wise. He got 75 points in 82 games, 36 goals, and he was ranked 64th by the NHL in their fantasy rankings, and he was 44th in CBS fantasy scoring this last year. Also, as the Islanders' offense maybe gets a little more healthy and a little bit more consistent, Brock Nelson will also get some more points naturally. I think this is a great bet, especially if you're in a scoring consistent centerman. Now, talking about consistent scoring centerman, let's go on to number 5 here, and I got Chandler Stephenson of the Vegas Golden Knights, another player that flashy with the play, but maybe not the most exciting pick to make, but will lead to a lot of value down the line. He was ranked in a weird spot too, 110th by the NHL after getting 70th in CBS fantasy scoring last year with 177 points. But you see, not under 170 the past 2 years, consistent scoring threat there, and with the speed and the skill that he has, he's not likely to, I guess, decrease that scoring at all. And with Vegas still being a competent team, still being incredible offensively, Stevenson will be a great beneficiary of that. Now let's go on to number 4, another player that is getting highly underrated, especially at the top end of the draft, and that is Adrian Kempe of the LA Kings. He was ranked 60th by the NHL in their forward rankings, but was 30th in CBS fantasy scoring last year. If you get him in the 4th, 5th round, that is incredible value to be had, especially with how consistent he's been as a goal scorer the last couple of years. 35 goals in 2021-22, 41 goals in 2022-23, and I see that increasing as the Byfield Kopitar line is complete throughout the season. Kempe is going to be unreal still next year and bring a lot of those defensive stats too that you want to see out of it. Now going on to maybe the most underrated forward heading into next year, one of the most, I have Jeff Skinner of the Buffalo Sabres, a player that has been really incredible and consistent over the past couple of years. Got 63 points in 2021 and 82 points, 35 goals in 79 games last year, increasing to 239 points on CBS. But you can see what he's been able to do as well, but also just his stock too isn't that high really either. He was 73rd by the NHL in forward rankings and was 27th in CBS fantasy scoring among forwards last year. He is a consistent bet, especially considering Buffalo's rise, their ascension offensively. They're not going to be backing down anytime soon. Now going on to number 2, and a player that really rose this last year and was fantastic as a value bet, and that is Brendan Hagel of the Tampa Bay Lightning. A player that increased their scoring, increased the unreal amount of takeaways, continued to get better in that department. Got 64 points in 81 games last year for 209 fantasy points in CBS, but he's a player that still kind of gets pretty underrated. He was 94th by the NHL in their rankings, 49th in CBS fantasy scoring, and I don't really see him stopping. He's right in the prime of his career as a busy bee for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think he'll still stay consistent. Next up, let's go on to the biggest sleeper of the 2023-24 fantasy season. And next up, I got Reilly Smith of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Traded from Vegas, now on to Pittsburgh. To me, he's going to get all the opportunity as that first line left wing alongside Crosby, especially while Jake Guentzel is out. That is going to be huge for Reilly Smith. Even when Guentzel comes back, though, you're still going to have potential pairing with Malkin, and that's going to be huge. I think Smith, though, is in a great position. Got 169 fantasy points last year with 56 points. I think he'll still be around that 60-point range, but we'll see more versatility in Smith's game. But he was interestingly ranked 146th by the NHL. Was 78th in CBS fantasy scoring among forwards last year. I see that getting even higher this next season. But now let's move on to the top 10 sleepers among defensemen, and we're going to start out today's list with Mikhail Sergachev, who is maybe the more underrated top-end guy, maybe the most underrated top-end guy in fantasy drafts right now. He was ranked 18th by the NHL among D, while getting 12th in CBS fantasy scoring among D last year, and to me, I only really see that increasing. As Victor Hedman declines more and more, Sergachev gets even more opportunity, and you can see 64 points in 79 games last year, with those counting physical stats always getting better and better. Sergachev is an amazing bet, and maybe as like a third rounder would be perfect for you. Going on to number 9, another Florida D-man here, another guy that gets underrated quite a bit. I got Gustav Forsling of the Florida Panthers, who has put up back-to-back 170-plus fantasy seasons, and it's easy to see why. 37 points in 2021-22, 41 points in 2022-23, and I don't really see that stopping, even though Aaron Ekblad and Montour will be hopefully healthy for the full season. I think you'll also see, again, another increase in those counting defensive stats where Forsling has always been so good at. To me, as a value add in one of the last few rounds, he's another D-man that could get overlooked big time. Now going on to the 8th biggest sleeper among defensemen. Next up, I'm going to go to Edmonton Oilers top D in Darnell Nurse, who I don't love as a top D, but fantasy-wise, I think still has a lot of value to give. He's put up pretty good seasons, 197 points fantasy-wise last year, 43 points in 82 games for him, but I still see another increase in those defensive counting stats. But he was ranked 33rd by the NHL and was 20th in CBS fantasy scoring last year. I think he'll be fully healthy next season. Hopefully we'll see that consistent again like we did in 2022-23, and that will lead to a lot of value. Another player that's not super flashy, but will be a good value pick if he's available in the later rounds. Now going on to the 7th biggest sleeper among D-men. Next up, I got Justin Falk of the St. Louis Blues. An interesting one here. He wasn't ranked in the NHL's top 55 fantasy D, but was 24th in CBS fantasy scoring last year. Even though the Blues had a huge down year, and even he had a little bit of a down year, he was still great in that department. 180 fantasy points, got 50 points in 82 games. And I think we'll still see the offense carry over in a big way. Maybe not the defensive attributes, and that could be something that's a little bit lacking. But at the same time, again, he's another D that if you're looking for a couple of last picks Falk would be an excellent choice. Offensively still has a lot to bring, and hopefully with other players getting healthy on St. Louis's forward group, you get a little more points as well. Next up for my 6th sleeper on D, I got Noah Hanifin of the Calgary Flames, who had a little bit of a down year last year, but still got 140 points, which wasn't horrible, 38 points in 81 games. And to me, it's interesting because he wasn't in the top 55 for the NHL, but was 42nd in CBS fantasy scoring after having a major down year last season. I think Calgary's defense will get a lot better. I think Hanifin and Weegar, especially if you're able to pick him, would be a fantastic pick. But those two guys are going to be rebounding massively for Calgary's defense, and you want to take advantage. Now going on to the top 5 sleepers among D here, and next up, I'm going to go with an interesting addition with Connor Clifton of the Buffalo Sabres, who with Boston was pretty interesting last year. When you look at it, he wasn't in the NHL's top 55 among fantasy D, but was 65th in CBS fantasy scoring among D last year. To me, I think in an increased role as well in Buffalo's middle pair alongside Owen Power, you'll see more points added on as well as those hits. I think he got over 200 hits last year, which are huge for those physical counting stats and really rise his stock quite a bit. If you increase the offense too, could be an amazing bet here. For my 4th biggest sleeper among D, I'm going to go with Ryan Graves of the Pittsburgh Penguins. No matter what, he's going to be alongside either Erik Karlsson or Kris Letang. Either of those two D are going to be really interesting to be paired with, but Ryan Graves last year got 135 points fantasy-wise after getting 26 points in 78 games, but those counting stats are going to be raising quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting around 40 points there, and he's especially a player if he's available in the later rounds. If you need a D to fill, Graves would be excellent and will have major opportunity to put up major points. Next up, going on to number 3, I got Aaron Ekblad of the Florida Panthers, another Florida D here. He was ranked 39th by the NHL, or 39th by the NHL fantasy-wise, and was 30th in CBS fantasy scoring among D last year. We're going to see him have another rebound season, get back to probably that 200-point range, and another guy that could be swept under the rug. Next up at number 2, I'm going to go with Juuso Valimaki of the Arizona Coyotes. Sean Durzi is likely going to have a lot of power play time there, but I would still see Valimaki in a full season with Arizona doing pretty well points-wise, as well as defensively. That will be the biggest upgrade next year. He wasn't in the NHL's top 55, but was 63rd in the CBS scoring last year. I see that improving again. Then for my biggest sleeper among defensemen, I'm going to go with Mike Matheson of the Montreal Canadiens. He was another player that didn't get a lot of hype, 51st among D for the NHL's fantasy rankings, but was 50th in CBS fantasy scoring last year after only playing 48 games. The offense was incredible, but I think the overall game will also take another big step back, and he'll be in a great position as Montreal's number 1 D. Now let's go on to the biggest sleepers for goaltenders. I have 5 different guys that I want to list as major contenders. Coming in at number 5, I have Juuse Saros in the Nashville Predators, who was really interesting, 10th by the NHL in their goaltending rankings, even though he was 4th in CBS fantasy scoring next year. I only see that increasing. I think he could have a Vezina Trophy-worthy season. I think Nashville's going to be much better than they were before with Andrew Brunette as their new head coach, and Juuse Saros is one of the best goalies in the league. Pick him if you have the chance. Now going on to number 4, and we're going to go on to Vitek Vanecek of the New Jersey Devils, a player that will really benefit from New Jersey getting even better this last year. He was already pretty solid at fantasy-wise, 307 points last season, played 52 games, but I think we'll still see him play a chunk of New Jersey's minutes and look pretty good in them too in the regular season. With New Jersey getting even better as a starter, those wins matter a lot, and that's going to be great to see out of him. At number 3, I got Thatcher Demko with the Vancouver Canucks. Really, the health is a big thing, and Vancouver also getting a lot better defensively, that being the biggest thing they improved on the offseason. Thatcher Demko's stats are likely to improve a lot as well. Expect him maybe in the 920 range if he's healthy, but a really value bet as a starter if you want to have him there. Next up, going on to number 2, and we're going to go on to the only rookie on this list, and that is Joel Hofer of the St. Louis Blues. Do not be surprised if he ends up taking Jordan Binnington's starter job at some point throughout this next season. Looked pretty good in the games he played for St. Louis, but I think this next year is going to be really shows that. If you're going to pick any rookie, honestly, Joel Hofer might be the best bet. And next up, going on to number 1, my biggest fantasy sleeper for goaltending this next year, I got Ilya Samsonov of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Wins are a huge part of fantasy, and Samsonov is going to be racking them up this year. Toronto's going to be a great regular season team. We all know this. I could even see them winning the Atlantic Division, but Samsonov was great last year in a big role, and I think that role is going to get even bigger this next year, with Joseph Woll being really the only backup quality player. But now we can move on to maybe the spiciest part of the video, and here are 5 players to avoid in the 2023-24 fantasy season. Guys that, I mean, there's a couple of exceptions, maybe if they're available in the last few rounds you could pick them, but guys I would generally avoid above some other top tier players. First, I got Max Pacioretty of the Washington Capitals, and you can see just the health issues. I would love if he was healthy this year, but he just hasn't shown to actually do that, and to me that is a huge disconnect. If he is healthy, sure, that's great, but I personally wouldn't use a draft pick on him. If he's in free agency, go after him if he's fully healthy, but I wouldn't put too much stock in him being a fully healthy player all the way through. Next up, coming on to the next player, I got Pyotr Kochetkov of the Carolina Hurricanes. With how much Carolina's goaltending system is just kind of a carousel, sure, Kochetkov could get a few games here and there, but he's not going to get a ton of workload. He got 24 games last year, which was good to see, but I feel like with Ronta and Anderson, if they're fully healthy, Kochetkov just isn't going to get the minutes that he truly needs yet. Maybe 2024, 25 is the year that happens, but if you're really expecting Kochetkov in a lot of games, I think you might be disappointed. Now we're going to go on to the next player here, and with the emergence of Erik Karlsson onto the defense, at number 3, I got Kris Letang, and this isn't anything against Kris Letang. Again, he's a player that if he's available way later on, sure, go for him, but the decline was already starting to happen before his minutes decreased. 41 points in 64 games, and to me, with Erik Karlsson coming into the fold, a lot of those offensive opportunities are going to evaporate for him, which was his bread and butter. I don't think the fantasy points are going to be all too plentiful this next year, and he might be somebody to avoid, honestly. Now on to my next player, and this really just depends on the team around him, but I got Robert Thomas of the St. Louis Blues. I drafted him, I think, in like the 6th or 7th round last year, and it was a total mistake. The inconsistencies almost led me to cut him completely, and that will be something that I still think we will see next year. You also consider the complete lack of goal scoring, 18 goals and 20 goals in back-to-back years, and to me, that leads to a lack of fantasy points compared to his peers. Sure, the playmaking is great to see, but it often becomes a little bit disappointing, especially with the defensive play that just doesn't really bring a lot of counting stats for fantasy that you want to see either. Now going on to my last player to avoid in the 2023-24 fantasy hockey season, and that is Sergei Bobrovsky of the Florida Panthers. Obviously, his run in the playoffs was magical. It was great to see. But regular season Bobrovsky hasn't shown the greatest things recently. I mean, in 2021, he was pretty solid, but in 2022, he took a big nosedive back to a below average level. And to me, betting on him being a great regular season goalie hasn't really proved too much over the past 2 years. A lot of other options you could go for that likely could be a little more healthy, a little bit more consistent in the regular season at least. But that'll be it for my complete breakdown of the 2023-24 fantasy hockey season. I hope you guys did enjoy it. It was so much fun putting this list together. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you haven't already for more hockey content just like this. Let us know down below which players are you going to be targeting as your sleepers, which players are you going to be avoiding, who do you want to draft in your 2024 fantasy draft. Let us know all your thoughts. Of course, make sure you share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Get it to all the fantasy owners out there, except your own fantasy opponents, because these are hot tips you don't want to be giving them. And make sure you share this video with all the friends you guys know. Click on this card for all of my Hockey Talk Right in One playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.